Welcome to the Focal Point Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Riggs. Here I take a deep dive into my personal interests of the hidden craftsmanship, philosophies, and passions behind society's talent. If you're intrigued by artistic nuance, please subscribe and follow on my YouTube channel, Spotify, and Buzzsprout. With that being said, let me introduce you to today's guests. For context, I released a short film this last May, but it was extracted out of a feature that we just couldn't finish. And so it had been on, my plate for quite a while, and I kind of just had to pull the cord and make that decision executively. But once I did that, I put it out there and showed it to a few friends, but now I've kind of made it private again because I want to submit it to festivals. And it's the least fun part about this whole process, but it's necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of unsexy things about filmmaking that people don't realize.
48-hour festivals, though, are the least sexy. They have to be.
For sure.
They're like the bastard children that we adopt, but
that's funny.
I have seen some good 48s, though. They're what people can do within that framework is sometimes rather impressive.
Yeah, I can see that.
But only if the dream team's there. You have to have a dream team who has done 48-hour film festivals for 5 years in a row, and then they just end up winning every single time, and then they get bored of it, and then the new people come in. That seems to be the cycle that I witness.
Out of the cycle, yeah.
But all right. Well, we're recording. We're live. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Sure.
I reached out to a Facebook group that you were a part of, because I was just looking for some new talent to kind of see what's going on. But also for context, I'm from the Cincinnati, Columbus area. And I've interviewed and talked to a lot of artists and creatives around me locally and a little bit from, Philadelphia. But I don't think I had reached out yet to the Chattanooga, Tennessee, Knoxville, and Nashville area. So I started reaching out a little bit to see, what was there. And then eventually I came across you and I saw some of your work. But just go ahead and take a second to introduce yourself, what you do, and how you got into it.
Yeah, and before I do, the Columbus, I was in a film. One of my films was in a film festival in Columbus. Nightmare. Really? Yeah, Nightmare something. I can't remember now. Anyway, I'm Jameson Brawley. I live in Chattanooga. I tell people I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I really live in a place called Ringgold, Georgia, which is 10 minutes south of Chattanooga. I grew up in Chattanooga. I'm in my 40s. And all my life as a kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I didn't know what a filmmaker was. I didn't know if it was the guy who held the camera. I don't know if it was the guy who was in front of the camera. I didn't know if it was the guy who did the lighting. And
now we still don't know.
Yeah, that's really true. But I'd always had these stories that I'd kind of type out in Microsoft Word, maybe 2 pages long. And I'd never written a script because the crazy thing was that I was always scared of doing it wrong. It's such a stupid thing to say, but I didn't know what font to use. I didn't know the formatting. I didn't know the spacing. And so I didn't know the terminology that people would use in scripts. And so that just sort of held me back until it was only a few years ago that I was telling a friend of mine all these ideas for films I had. And she said, you should write one. And she's 20 years younger than me. And she had made 4 films at this point. And I thought, yeah, this kid basically is telling me that I can write scripts. And so she said, just write it with pencil and paper and don't worry about formatting. And then once you've got your story down, then you can worry about formatting. But it's just funny how those little hurdles can prevent us from doing so much. A little bit more background. I'm a wedding videographer. I've been a wedding videographer for 15 years. And I tell people it's not every little boy's dream to be a wedding videographer. It does pay the bills, and it has helped me, like we were talking before we started recording, it has helped me to think quickly because, you're basically working on a set with actors who are not trained actors. You have no script at all. You have to use whatever lighting's available, and you only get 1 take. So that I've used in the filmmaking world, much to my DP's chagrin, because in many ways I'm like, okay, we can do this real quick. We can knock this out. Okay, we don't need that light. Let's just go, which is not really how you should properly make a film. You should take time. But I think it's a happy balance, being able to think on the fly, work on the fly, and also understand that good things take time to set up and to work well.
You made a film, I believe, I forget the name of it. It's like Maintenance something, but it was in 2013. I think you made that film.
Maintaining justice. Okay. Yeah,
And
that's
then there
hilarious.
was like a 10-year gap
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
made your next one. What
Yeah.
happened there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. So that was a buddy of mine, a college friend of mine who was in town, and he was a big film buff, and we are like, let's just make something. So he always had these. He was a big comic book guy, so we thought it'd be funny to have the idea of the superhero who's in his 50s now, and sort of his superpowers have sort of drained, and he maintains the safety of this small town because he doesn't have the abilities anymore to maintain the justice in New York or LA or Atlanta. And there was no script. We just kind of decided the scenes on the fly. And it was around that time that I was starting to explore the idea of, maybe making a documentary or something. And then I started to look at how much it costs and, how much gear costs. And again, I didn't know what a filmmaker was. So I thought, oh, well, I've got to buy all the lights. I've got to buy all the C-stands. I've got to buy all the cameras. And it was so prohibitive that I remember making the decision about then I was just going to focus on being a really amazing wedding videographer. And not to toot my own horn, but I did become, like, at least in our region, one of the top wedding videographers, and my work stood out among everyone else. And I was just like, this is how I can make money and still be a storyteller. And so that 10-year gap, at the end of that 10-year gap was when that younger friend of mine said, just write it all down on a piece of paper with pencil. I'd forgotten about maintaining justice. But what's funny is that I'm
actually
remind
you of all the things that you forgot about.
Yeah, what's funny is that I actually started writing a feature for that. Same concept where the superhero who's protected Atlanta for decades is now turning 50, and the mayor's like, "You're causing more trouble than good. Just move out, retire to a small town." And so he starts to find little crimes to solve or to help the citizens there, and he's just annoying to them. But what's funny is that his nemesis from the big city is also in his 50s and losing his power, so he moves to the small town that the hero's at, and they insanity ensues from there. But
honestly, that's a really funny concept. You know how the boys kind of turned superheroes into they took a very different take on superheroes, but it was more about it was a bit of a commentary on society. This one sounds like one of those. I don't want to say depressing, but it's almost like a comedy.
It is a comedy.
There's two superheroes are like, oh, do we really even want to fight at this point? Because now they got like a herniated disc or something like that, and they just.
That's funny you said that. I've had 3 of those. It's sort of that. There was a Will Smith movie where he was always a drunk superhero. I forget the name of it.
Is it Hancock?
Hancock. And so that's kind of what it's based on, except instead of the hero being a drunk loser, he's just getting older. But anyway, that's that. I got to about page 70 in the writing and realized, wow, I'm still not out of Act 1. I hadn't really honed like my writing abilities then. And so when you realize that, at least for me, I'm kind of lazy and I'm trying to get better at this. When I realized I'm at page 70 and still in Act 1, I just said, we'll put it off. So I haven't written on that for probably a year.
What software do you use?
There's a website called Writer Duet, WRITERDUET.com. And you just write it in the browser. So, any computer you log into, you've got your work there. They give you 3 scripts for free. So, I just keep 3 that I'm working on in there.
You just make a new email account every time you run out.
Could. Yeah, you could. But with your account, you can write 3 scripts. And when I say 3 scripts, like you could finish one, print it out, and then delete it, and then create another one. So
okay.
I've paid for it, I think, once when I needed to. One of the features for the paid version is you can collaborate with other people, so other people can log into it and make changes. Like the DP would put DP notes in his version, that sort of thing. But
I've been using the same online software for over 10 years at this point.
Oh yeah,
for screenwriting. It's called Celts.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, honestly, most people, every time I mention it, and it's been around for a while and it has a lot of great features, but every time I mention it, people haven't heard of it. I've only met
Okay.
one other person in my life, of all the other creatives that I've talked to, who have even heard of Celts.
Mhm.
And it's great software, and it's free, but it has the most amount of free features that I've seen from a bunch of more other popular screenwriting softwares. And it has, within the unlock feature, it also gives you like a lot of analytics and statistics based on your writing habits, how long it takes you. It even distinguishes between thinking time and writing time.
Wow. Jeez. I wonder what mine would be.
Because like when you stop writing, it pauses for like 5 seconds and then switches over the clock to thinking until you start writing something again. It's really, it's a fun little thing that it keeps up. But yeah, if you haven't tried out Celts, maybe check it out. It's really, it's quirky. It's kind of quirky, but it works great, and it's free for the most part.
Nice.
So when you started getting back into filmmaking, which project was it? I'm trying to remember. Which project was it that got you back into filmmaking? Because you've done three projects since then, and all of them actually have been horror films, right?
Three of my own, and then I've worked on two others that, like we said before we started recording, are sort of like my adopted children. The first one was called Hit on the Head, which that was an idea me and a friend of mine had 15 years ago. He was kind of into movies too, and we always thought we would write movies together. But the idea was, at that time, people were putting the stick figure families on the back of their cars.
Yeah,
if you remember,
I remember that.
And we were in traffic, and there was one in front of us, and he said, "What if that's not their family? What if that's how many people they've killed?" And so that was the genesis of that story. And that was, I remember maybe 3 or 4 years ago, just kind of cleaning out my desktop computer, and I found a folder called scripts, and I opened it up, and that story was written in Notepad. It was maybe 2 pages long. And then a few weeks later, I'd met with that friend who told me just start writing with a pencil and paper. And when you do that, there's something magical about doing that. Is your brain starts working on a different level than when you're typing with your fingers and looking at a screen, and it's almost like autopilot. It's really magical. And so I hammered that out. That was about 13 pages long. And of course, even the final product, as you know, some of the things that happen in the final product were not in the script, that we had to change on the fly or decide on the fly. But yeah, the antithesis for that was seeing the stick figure family on the back of a car and thinking it's more like how World War II pilots on the side of their planes would put how many kills they had.
Honestly, you could take that concept for a lot of different things, but instead it kind of makes it funnier, even though it's a horror movie.
Very
the
dark,
fact that it's like this innocent little family on the back, and turns out it's not that. You could even make that a comedy.
Well, when we first see it, when the main character sees there's like 3 dads and 2 moms and a bunch of kids, and she's like, "Oh, it's a twisted family you got there."
Mm-hmm. What was the best creative input that someone else contributed to a film of yours?
I think it was with that. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is probably not the best example, but it was that first film, Hit on the Head, which I wanted to include a dog in it. And we all know that the big rule is never, ever kill a dog in your films, or everyone's going to hate you. And so
it's safer to kill a child, honestly, ironically.
Yeah, sadly. But so in the film, not to spoil it, but she backs her car up and hits a dog. And it was a trained dog. It was my niece trains dogs. And I was just sitting there. It was 3:00 in the morning. And I was like, guys, I don't know what to do here. I don't know where the story should go. What happens to the dog? And the boom operator, who is this guy older than me, who had never been a boom operator before, he just simply says, "What if the dog just got up and left?" And I just cracked up laughing. I don't know if it was because I was tired, but I was like, fine, that's what we do. And so the dog's pretending to be dead because it senses, I guess, the danger of the killer. And as soon as she closes the door, the dog gets up and leaves. And when I've been in film festivals where that happens, the audience is so relieved and they cheer. I remember I was at one film festival. It was in Long Beach, California, and it was this Australian guy behind me. And I was chatting with him before the film started because it was an audience award thing, and I was kind of trying to charm and schmooze people. And I was chatting with him, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm really looking forward to your film." And so when that scene happened, when she backs the car up and hits the dog, he leans forward and says, "You just lost my vote, mate." And then, of course, the dog gets up and leaves, and he pats me on the back and says, "Good job." So,
All right, now you get my vote.
yeah, now you get
Now
my
I'll vote for you. Now, when you're submitting your films to film festivals, do you try to target strictly horror film festivals? And what's the ratio of success to all-encompassing film festivals versus strictly horror film festivals?
Yeah, I know you're supposed to do that, and I do. I obviously do take that into consideration, and I've had luck with that. Like, for example, the Long Beach one, it's a film festival within a horror convention. So the film festival is in one of the rooms, among other things you can do at a horror festival. It's not a big audience participation in that, and the award's a piece of paper, but I can almost any film. I'm assured that any of my horror films I submit, they're going to accept. But some of my most successes have come from non horror film festivals. One, for example, is called Sugar Hill Film Festival. It's in this little town north of Atlanta. It's put on by the city. And I just submitted to that because one of my actresses lived in that town, and she strongly suggested I submit. And I didn't even realize there was $1,000 prize for first place, and I won that. I didn't even go. I just got a text from her saying that we won. And then I was in a film festival in Rome, Georgia, which, by the way, is where a lot of Stranger Things was shot. And it was not a horror film festival. It was a fantastic film festival, just so well run, well organized, a 3-day event, and they really treated their filmmakers like kings and queens. And it had nothing to do with horror, and I didn't win anything, but I just loved that whole experience. So to your question, I guess if people are making a horror film and looking to submit to film festivals, I would always say focus on the ones that are horror based. They usually run in October, so you're going to have a lot of overlapping if you do that, but some you can go to and some you can't.
Would you consider yourself a horror-only director? Or are there other genres of interest that you like to do but just haven't gotten the time to do yet?
Well, the funny thing is I don't like horror at all. I don't. I have no
Really?
interest. Yeah, I don't. I don't watch horror films. I don't care. I don't. I've never seen I've never seen one Halloween movie, which is shocking because a lot of the scenes in my first horror film, I was describing them to my DP, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this was in Halloween 3, right?" I was like, "I've never seen it." He pulled up the scene. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's the exact vision."
I thought I
But
was being original.
yeah, I know, and that happens a lot, unfortunately. But I think that horror is a very easy starting point to sort of learn how to write, because it's I tell people it's very easy to scare someone. I can say, "Hey, there's a spider on your shoulder," and you're freaked out. But it's harder for me to make you laugh. It's harder for me to tell you a story that's going to make you cry tears of joy. It's harder to write a love story or historical fiction and get the sort of emotion you want, but it's very easy to scare somebody. So I've always thought, fear is like our most primal emotion. It's the one thing that keeps us alive, as cavemen or whatever. So that's kind of why my first 3 are horror thrillers, because they're just, to me, and I don't want to disparage people who write horror, I guess, for a living, but it's an easier emotion to elicit from people than anything else. And now I'm writing a feature that's a historical piece, and I'm writing along with that a rom-com, and then the superhero one that I mentioned to you about. So, and none of those are horror thrillers, because I feel like I've gone through my writing school, I guess, with the shorts.
Would you consider yourself more of a writer or a director?
Oh yeah, I like the idea of being a writer more. I've directed 3 and been assistant director for 2, and it's just, I don't think I have it. Like I don't think I have it, but I say that because on the three that I directed, I didn't have an assistant director, and it's small crew, and as a director, I'm doing everything and I'm not focusing on directing, you know.
Right.
So maybe I don't really know what it feels like to direct, and that's why I volunteered to be an assistant director on two of my friends' films, because I wanted them to be able to do what a director should do, and I'll do all the unsexy stuff.
What are the writing lessons that you've learned from doing just, horror scripts that you're figuring out that you need to adapt or do differently to write different genres?
I think with horror, especially with shorts, I don't think you really need to worry too much about character development, because again, we're just there to scare you. We know who the bad guy is with the knife, and we know who the good people are. um, I think a thing I try to do now when I'm writing is think, if I didn't know who was saying this, if I could cover with my thumb the name of the character and just read what they're saying, would I know who this character is? So that's kind of an exercise I do, is while I'm writing, I need to write in such a way that I would know who this character is just based upon the way they're talking, the beats they're making, the vernacular they use, the words they use, maybe maybe you've written in such a way that it sounds like an accent, and I think that that's advantageous, especially if you're trying to sell a script. People want to know that each character can be read and seen differently, even if you were to just delete all the character names.
One of you released two horror films, I believe, in the same year. I don't remember if it was this year or last year or the year before. One of the films got I think is around 1,000 views, and then the other one is over 270,000 views.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that, and why do you think that happened?
So the one you're talking about with all the views, 250,000, that was the first one. I created that YouTube account specifically to post that video. And so I don't know what the algorithm was thinking, honestly, because I didn't have any other content. I had a long
So
description.
this was the first video
This
that
was
you
the
had
first
uploaded
one.
to the account.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, this is my path to fame. I can't believe it. I'm amazing. Tons of comments.
I can do cocaine and get away with it now.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, well, okay, this next one I'm going to do, we're going to shoot for 6 days. It's going to be twice as long, and it's going to be a more in-depth story. And yeah, I think that one was called Night Mommy, and it did poorly at film festivals. It did poorly on YouTube. I thought we were putting more into it, and in fact,
It was
I
about
think
3 times the runtime of the other film.
that was another reason it didn't get accepted. It was 23 minutes long, which is an extremely odd time for film festivals. A slot for film festivals, like they would love it if it was 15 minutes, they'd love. If it was 30 minutes, it might have done better. But 23 is just like, what do we do with this? Where can I put this? Where can I fit this in an hour time slot? I feel like I did go back just for my own sake and re-edit it to get it down to 19 minutes. Just there's so much joy and terror in deleting scenes and lines. It feels so good, but it also is so scary to kill your darlings. But I realized that there was a lot in that film that didn't need to be there. There's a lot of telling and not showing, which is a big problem with independent films. So yeah, that was a big, and that's why I made Slideshow. Slideshow was my third film. And I was like, okay, we're going to boil all this down. We're not going to make it a big production. We're going to shoot everything in one room, and we're going to shoot over a period of 24 hours, which I know that sounds like 48 hours.
It was a period piece too. It took place in like the 70s or 80s, and the sets were really well done, I have to say.
Thank you, and I'd love to talk about that. But real quick, that was like, I'm going to take everything from Night Mommy, which was the 23-minute one that took 6 days to shoot, and I'm going to do the opposite. And we're going to hire 4 actors, and they're all going to sit in one room, and we're going to have them show up the night before and do a screen test. which we actually went ahead and shot a few scenes with him. And then the whole next day we're going to shoot. So it was really a 1-day shoot. And I think it turned out better. To the set pieces, that what you see in that film is exactly how the house looked when we walked in.
Really?
Yeah, I
It's
got
kind
on
of a time
Facebook.
capsule.
I got on Facebook and was asking, hey, does anybody's Meemaw have a room that looks like this? And this lady who's my age, she's like, I have a room that looks exactly like what you need. I'm such a fan of the 70s, and I've got it all themed to look like the 70s. And we walked in and we were like, we don't have to do anything. I think I brought in a rotary phone, a Life magazine from the 70s, and an ashtray, but they smoked, and they already had ashtrays. Oh, and the percolator I bought. So that was the only things I added to that set.
That is a rare thing to happen.
Absolutely.
To find a time capsule piece for a film like that.
Saved a
You
lot
had to
of
have been
money.
ecstatic because you didn't even have to do a whole lot of work to it.
Nothing. I didn't have to do anything. Everything you see is exactly how it was when we walked in.
What was the conversations that you had with your director of photography for Slideshow, given that everything was already there? Because you had to have like hit the ground running.
Yeah, we walked in, and if you recall, there's a cow skull above the fireplace. That wasn't written in the script. That he saw that and said, okay, we're going to do a scene here. We have to use the skull. We have to use the horns. And what really helped that shoot be efficient is me and my director of photography and the gaffer went to that house probably 2 weeks before we shot. And I played one of the actors, and my daughter came with us. She played another actor, and he just kind of handheld his camera, and we did sort of a video storyboard. And then on the day of shooting, he showed up with screenshots of the video storyboard printed out on his shot list, so we knew exactly, where the camera needed to be, where the actors needed to sit, and it just flowed. It was beautiful. It was beautiful how efficient and quick that shoot was.
As a writer, I would imagine that you, as a director, you tend to pay more attention to the actors than you do in comparison to the cinematography. Am I right?
Yeah. I give full trust to the DP. I'm not a nerd when it comes to cameras and lenses and stuff and aperture and all that, and I don't even want to pretend. So, I joke with him on set, and I'm like, make it more cinematic. Of course, it's a joke, but I mean,
Make sure you give it the movie look, right?
Yeah,
Don't forget the movie look.
But I think that's a wise thing, is to just give it. That's what they're there for. You hired a cameraman to do what they do best. They know what lenses to pop on and pop off, and he's great in that he understands that the camera is the eyes of the audience, and what you do with that camera can determine how the audience feels. So I know this sounds probably very elementary to a professional DP who may be listening, but if the camera's lower, that elicits a certain emotion. If the camera's higher, it elicits a certain emotion. If it's tilted, that elicits a certain emotion. And having a DP that understands all of that beyond what lens to use and what aperture and f-stop to use really takes your film up 1%.
Okay. Are there any angles that you do see? Because obviously when you're writing, there is a version of what the film looks like in your head.
Yeah.
And then you get to set, and now somebody else has read the script. Now they have a version of what it looks like in their head. So what are the conversations that you have with your DP specifically when it comes to merging those two visions together? Because ultimately you're the director, you do have the final say, but you got to walk that line of not being able to crush their creativity and being able to recognize good ideas that are better than yours when it comes to accomplishing, shooting the script in a way that is going to end up being the best version.
Well, a lot of times what we would do is get together, and I would have, obviously, if we've watched movies our whole life, we are being influenced one way or another by certain scenes in certain movies. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I would come to him, and say, okay, on this scene, I want it to look like this scene from Back to the Future 2. There's one shot where Biff or Marty's in the middle of the pond on the hoverboard, and he can't move on the hoverboard because it's on water. And Biff takes the bat, and the camera goes right up into him, and he says, "Batter up." And there's a scene in Night Mommy where it's just ripped straight from Back to the Future too. And I'll give him that scene and say, this is what we need to recreate. And then we'll look on Shot. I think the website's called Shot Deck, where you can put in like colors and all sorts of keywords, and it'll show you scenes from different movies. And we'll pull from those and make our shot list from that. I'm not really sure if that answers your question or not, but I've known my DP. I've known him for 10 years. He used to be a wedding videographer also. We worked together on weddings. We competed.
Do you ever share horror stories together? About
horror
like
stories?
Bridezillas?
Oh yeah, everyone always asks me that, but I do. I mean, I know that's a whole different podcast altogether, but I do a lot of consultations before I say yes. You can kind of sense red flags. So I've never really had a Bridezilla in 15 years.
Well, that's a talent in and of itself.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that's a skill set that honestly does come in handy for filmmaking, because when you're interviewing people, to
Actors.
see if they're going to have that type of self-entitled attitude when it comes to coming on set and delivering, their aspect of your vision.
Yeah.
Have you turned down some actors and other positions?
Yeah. As I was about to say, we had some auditions, and when there's one I'm thinking of in particular, when they would get the line wrong, sort of their reaction to their frustration with themselves was a red flag just right off the bat. Like, that's not, like, I want my film sets to feel like summer camp. I don't want any drama. I'm not a director who's, like a dictator. I just like to have fun. I like it to feel like summer camp, and I don't want people to take it too seriously. Because I mean, we're not making money doing this. We're just having fun. And most of the people on the crew are my friends that I hang out with socially outside of film sets. So it's really just an excuse for us to just hang out and have fun. So if anyone's going to bring any too much drama, you can easily see that in auditions and how people are in their auditions. And you don't know how if you don't know your grip, you don't know what they're going to bring, because you don't audition grips. That'd be funny. That'd be a funny short film though.
Grips are the most blue collar people probably, I would say, in the industry, based on personal experience. And those, especially if they're the sort of grips that travel for their work, because you got to go where the work is. Whether it be, Georgia, LA, even now in Ohio, actually, there's a fair amount of work that is new work that's coming to here. Like, great examples like the new Superman. They filmed some of those scenes in downtown Cincinnati. And, but I had one experience with some grips. I don't even remember what shoot it was, but I think me and some other, and this was years ago, me and some other people that I know were PAs on this commercial shoot. And the grips were from out of town. And right after we had, finished unloading what we were supposed to do out of the truck, we sat down, I think, for like 5 seconds or something like that. And I guess it had looked like we had been sitting on our asses for like a while. And they came in and just kind of shooed us off. And they didn't just shoo us off. They said shoo. Like all these PA flies. Shoo. I'm like, we just got finished unloading this. You're welcome, first of all.
That's funny. Shoo.
But I mean, some people do get jaded a little bit, especially not even necessarily when it comes to the tight scheduling of film, but it's mostly also the travel that some of these people do, is that they're just tired. Yeah. And not only they're tired, they also have to be creative when they're tired, and that's a skill set in and of itself. What about your experience when it comes to, like, because you did a lot of late night shoots for Hit on the Run and
Hit on the Head.
Hit on the Head, right? I'm getting my titles mixed up.
That's okay. That title, I regret that title, but that was the original title we had like 15 years ago when we came up with that idea. And the idea is a hit, like a hitman, and head is a slang for the toilet. And so people would watch that film. No one got hit on the head, so I have to explain it. So that's something I consider now when it comes to writing, like, especially after reading the book Save the Cat. He says your title needs to be what the film is about. And so looking back, I probably would have called it stick figure family or something like that. But anyway, yeah, late night shoots. So that hit on the head was, that gas station was gracious. The owner was gracious enough to let us shoot there, but his hours were he closed at 11 p.m. and opened at 4 a.m. So that was our window, and that was after shooting that afternoon in the bathroom, which was located in like a softball and soccer complex. So we had the city give us permission to shoot there. And yes, it was very difficult to keep people energized during that time. But I don't recall on that shoot anybody really suffering, with forgetfulness or being grumpy. I think.
How late did you normally go?
Well, with that being the first film, managing our time is something I had not perfected. I think we probably shot 12 hours that day, and then we shot again the next night, for some pickups. But the gas station had one employee who stayed. We had to pay him to stay, and he was always making coffee for us and giving us hot dogs that were on the little rollers. So we were fed well, and we had enough caffeine in us. But I would never do that again. Looking back, that was just a horrible thing to put people through. Being up at 4 a.m. It's just ungodly.
Well, I mean, that's also a staple of doing horror films.
It is,
like, well,
yeah.
we gotta like film it at night, right? Because apocalyptic things and all terrible things happen at night when people have no sleep. But some of the greatest horror films I've seen were like shot in broad daylight for the entirety of the film. There's something unsettling about people consciously doing terrible things when they have great sleep,
And I love that, because that's kind of why I make my villains cute girls, because there's something unsettling about an attractive, cute young woman being the villain that you don't expect. And that's, to me, that's scarier than, a big tough guy with a bunch of tattoos and piercings with a baseball
Tell
bat.
me you've watched anime without telling me you've watched anime before.
I do not watch anime.
You don't? Okay, never mind. All right.
But no, I did watch one in college, and I think I was traumatized by it because of a certain part of a female anatomy had teeth and claws, and I was like, "What have you asked me to watch?"
You're like, somebody drew this.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that is a staple of anime. Is like kind of taking innocence and just completely perverting it.
Sure.
And then slowly turning it into something.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
So when you started getting back into filmmaking, how did you start plugging yourself into the local community around you? And what were your experiences with getting to know those types of people? How would you describe your immediate filmmaking circle now in comparison?
Well, let me start at the beginning, because I didn't have a filmmaking community. I didn't know people who were filmmakers. All I knew was my circle of wedding videographers locally. And as it turned out, all of them wanted to have a creative outlet as well. And all it would have taken for me is somebody in my circles to say, "Hey, I wrote a film. Would you like to help me make it?" I was, "Yes, absolutely." And that's all it took for these people, was me saying, "Hey, I wrote a film. Does anybody want to help make it?" And just people were just coming out of the woodwork, because, you can only do so many weddings, work for other people before you're like, "I want to do something on my own." It's just sort of, kick back and let my creative juices flow. So my DP was a wedding videographer. My gaffer, he was more of a commercial videographer. The guy who built my set, part of the set in the bathroom, he was my second shooter at a lot of weddings. I mean, just everybody there was somehow involved in the local wedding industry. And then I did have to reach out to some people in Atlanta for like grips and and things like that. I think all my actors were local. One of them was a wedding videographer. One of them was a woman that had been in another film locally. And I'm sorry, the guy behind the counter, Hamilton, he was from Atlanta, so he was the only one I outsourced. And then as the years went on, it's funny how my circle sort of morphed from weddings to the film world. And ironically, it hasn't been many people in my local community that I've networked with and connected with.
Would you say you've built your own circle then?
Yeah, I think so. There are people here who are in the film community, I guess you could call it. But I don't really have a personal connection with them. And I don't like the idea of just having a connection or relationship with somebody just because I want something out of them. So I usually like to just work with people who I want to hang out with. Some want to get paid, and then some just want the creative opportunity. So that's how I've saved a lot of money, is not tricking people into working for free, but just saying, hey, I'm making something creative. Do you want to be a part of it? Can't really pay you much, but I'll feed you well. Mm-hmm. And that's a trick, is just if you're not gonna pay people, just get something other than pizza and sandwiches. I remember I paid like $500 to have this huge charcuterie board once, and people were just blown away by that. And I kept thinking, if they don't like me, at least they can say they ate well.
Well, I mean, every position, especially in the indie world, that is skilled labor, have at least one horror story of a film set where it's usually the director that's like a tyrant, or a producer that's making promises that they can't keep, and they're telling like half truths. It's not completely like, yeah, I'm going to pay you, but if we make money, and then they have up their abilities to make money off of it. That's a very common one. It's a very common one, and I recently heard from my own circle, the word, like if I were to describe to you the horror story of one particular individual who I've never met, however, many people in my local community have met, they can all affirm that this horror story was completely true. And if I were to tell you the story, you wouldn't believe it, because this character is literally somebody out of a bad movie. And people now tend to work with this individual just to see if the story is true. And it boggles my mind, because, well, now, like, okay, I get it. Guys, I don't even believe that this individual is the sort of character that he is. But now people are wanting to do projects with them.
Yes,
and perpetuate it just to see if it's true. And
I think every city has that person, because
it's always one guy. It's always one guy.
I'm thinking of one just like what you're describing, and everyone's got a nightmare story about him. But everyone also thinks that he has changed, and maybe the stories aren't true, and he has a lot of money, and he's making a lot of promises. But people have to learn. People have to pay their dues.
Mm-hmm. I do find it curious, though, is that, you're typically wedding videographers, when they get into film, they tend to be very focused on the cinematography aspects. But with you're focused a lot more on the story and the writing and the characters. Why do you think that you gravitate more toward that than like doing the cinematography yourself, given that you're very, experienced, at least in some form, with cameras?
Well, I mean, a wedding video is a lot different than, a narrative film. Just like news coverage is much different from a wedding video coverage. I don't think that my style of wedding videography would fit any film, any narrative film. I think a lot of times wedding videographers do overdo it with making something very cinematic, and they overdo the drone, and they overdo their gimbal work, and they want to really like show off for other videographers.
They're like trying to create that montage in the beginning of an action movie where they setting up the wife dying. You know, it's like they try to recreate that for the wedding.
Yeah, yeah. And I've changed my style a lot. I do focus more on what the wedding's about. I focus on what the story is. Usually, couples will have like letters they read to each other. Sometimes they write their own vows. Sometimes people getting toast at the reception. I use that as my script, and then I just kind of plug pretty images within that. But at the end of the day, I've stopped focusing so much on, oh, I got to make this look cinematic. Oh, no, she's in bad lighting. And I just focus on like what's important. Like one bride's most important thing, her wedding day was her grandparents. And even if she went in to visit her grandparents in an unwell lit room, I use that footage, and that's what was important to her that day. And for a film, I would rather watch, and I've seen it and you've seen it at film festivals where you watch a film and it is beautifully shot and you have no idea what the story is. Yep. And you forget it as soon as it's over. And then I've seen films, I'm thinking of one specific one, where the story is hilarious and the cinematography is non-existent. It was a story about an annoying ghost. Someone's house is haunted by a ghost, but it's just an annoying ghost. And the ghost is played by somebody under a white sheet. That's the CGI. That's the VFX. That's, and I still remember that. I still remember that story, and I remember what the characters looked like, and I remember cracking up. I think, filmmaking is like a wagon wheel. It's got all the spokes, and you have to have all those spokes. And one of them is the story, and one of them is the cinematics, and one of them is the audio. You could have a great looking film, and if the audio is the camera's microphone, you're out of it. You can't get your head into the story or into that world. I personally feel like the story. I mean, people want a story. People want a story more than the vistas of the Star Wars prequels. Like those images did nothing for me to like those films at all. They didn't help. But yeah, I think I'll focus. I think the storytelling element of weddings has sort of crept into what I find most important in filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the trend nowadays, I almost think that cinematography nowadays is too perfect. Like it always looks like they get everything just right. And it's almost like I can't get completely wrapped up in a movie where I'm so distracted by how perfect everything is.
I watched last night the antithesis of that. And if you have not seen Being John Malkovich, it is so, well, first of all, it'll mess with your head, but it's so dark. Like, and I mean visually, like I'm reading a book now, and I think some of the scenes were shot on high exposure film because they just used whatever lights were available. I mean, it's got John Cusack in it. It's got Gwyneth Paltrow in it, but you can hardly tell because there's so many shadows. And I think some people find that annoying. I found it immersive. And of course it's got John Malkovich in it. I found it completely immersive, and I loved it. And I loved the imperfect like there's so much handheld camera work. It's beautiful. You would love it. But yeah, you put that next to a Hallmark movie, and you're just like, which one am I more immersed in? The one that looks perfect or the one that looks like my living room right now?
Well, I think, I mean, the art of filmmaking is really trying to provide enough mystery to where, and this can be either with the script, with the direction style, with the cinematography, with the way that the actors are portrayed, is that you think you don't understand it. And so part of it, even if the film isn't written like as a puzzle, as a mystery that you're trying to figure out, there's something that you can't quite put your finger on about why you don't get it. If I watch a Marvel film, it looks great, it's cool, it's fun, but you already get it like within 5 minutes of the story happening. And I think that's part of the the allure of cinema is that we want to go into something that we don't initially understand.
Yeah. 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 And going back to Star Wars, I think the beauty of the originals, episode 4 through 6, is it didn't explain anything to you about the universe, the technology. It was so gritty and dirty feeling that you just took for granted this exists already in a different universe, and I don't have to really understand it. And then you go to the polished prequels, episodes 1 through 3, where everything is fully explained to you, everything looks brand new and beautiful, and it just doesn't feel, you don't feel like you're part of that universe. You feel like you're watching a movie about a different universe. Whereas, the gritty originals, or like being John Malkovich, you are immersed in that world because of the grit, the imperfections, the things that are broken, the poor lighting.
Mm-hmm. What what skill set did you have to learn in order to direct the films that you do that you didn't know or have before getting into it?
Say it again.
What
Say it again.
what was the most important skill set you had to learn as a director that you didn't have going into getting back involved in filmmaking that you didn't have beforehand?
I think one of the I think one of the aspects of my personality that was an advantage was that I'm a cheap bastard. And so I know I would go in saying, this is my budget. I want to make a film for less than this budget. And so when I write now, well, when I'm writing these features, I'm not thinking about budget because I'm not thinking I'll make them. But when I was writing shorts after my first one, I spent $7,000 on, I was writing thinking, how much is this going to cost? Okay, if we add this extra actor, that's an extra $150 a day. If I add this extra scene, now I've got to get liability insurance for another location. And so that's where Slideshow came from, where it cost me $1,800, 4 actors, 1 location, as opposed to, I don't even know how I managed to spend $7,000 on it. I really don't. I can't think. If there was a problem, I threw money at it.
You're like, less drone shots.
Yeah, there was a drone shot in that too. I think to answer your question, I think the way I write now, if I were to write another short that I wanted to make, I would always take into consideration how much is this going to cost, rather than, writing in a werewolf or writing in, ghosts or whatever, CGI and 10 extras that you'd have to pay. So yeah, I think budgeting is really what I've learned the most in this process.
And you feel that that's also affected the way that you write at this point in your pursuits?
Yeah, I think if you write a very complex script and you want to save money, that's going to show. It's going to look bad. If you write a script with a small budget in mind, then it fits and it works and it looks good.
For you, what makes the suffering of filmmaking worth it?
Yeah, I still to this day will think about the money I've spent and then think, man, I could have taken the family on like 3 vacations for this. It's such a selfish thing. I think that's the hard thing to get over, is that, and it's not just filmmaking, any creative person appears selfish to non-creative people. A musician has to play music. A musician will go to a bar and play for free drinks, taking time away from, their personal life just because they want to play in front of people and maybe not get paid anything. Same with a painter. A painter's got to find something to paint. Okay, I'll paint a mural in my house. No one's going to pay me for this. Maybe nobody's going to see it, but I have to do it. And filmmaking is that sufferable art. And it's so addictive to see an image in your head, see characters in your head, write them down on a piece of paper or type them up, and they become in your head like real people. Like you're remembering something a real person said or did, and you're laughing about it, or you might cry about it. And then you see it on film, and it's just this existential feeling that no one outside of this field can really understand. And I think the suffering is just the cost prohibitiveness of this art. I mean, yes, I can take my DSLR camera and I can make a little film, but if it's not like, my visions are beyond what I can make with a DSLR by myself. My visions are big and grand, and that would just be disappointing to make something small and insignificant. I would just feel like I'm just wasting time. If that answers your question.
So like the biggest struggle that I can sense that you probably also would feel, like a lot of creatives, is that there's this internal need to justify your time and your effort for what you love to do.
Yeah, luckily my wife understands it.
I mean, not a lot of people do, though.
No, that's true. I mean, I actually know a filmmaker whose wife divorced him. Of course, anyway.
Different podcast.
Yeah, my wife wants the posters of the films I worked on. She wants them in our movie room downstairs, and she says, "Oh yeah, they're interesting conversation pieces when people come." So she's really supportive of it. My kids get a kick out of it. My big regret is just, as a family man, that I've spent so much money on these things that I need, I want, rather than my family. But what are you gonna do?
Well, I mean, there is an element, though, and a lot of like fathers, I think, that I've noticed, is that the thing that their kids take away from fathers who engage in their artistic pursuits is that they witness what it's like to be able to be passionate about something, and that in a nutshell is enough to inspire them to essentially be who they want to be, or be who they are.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my daughter she's like me, not in filmmaking, but she is more the creative side of things and the intellectual. And I needed to have a sound and hit on the head of the phone falling on the floor. So I told my daughter, I was like, hold this microphone in my office.
I need you to fall down the set of steps for me.
I said, I'm going to drop this phone and you're going to record the sound. So I did that. And I said, okay, now move it across the floor. I need the sound of it moving across the floor. So I put her as the Foley artist in the credits, and she was over the moon. She anytime we show her friends my film, she's like, oh, there's my name in the credits, so hopefully that, I don't know, like you said, maybe that's going to inspire her to follow her creative passions.
Well, Jamison, it's been great talking to you and meeting you. Thanks for coming on. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave the audience?
Yeah, I would say, don't be like me, don't
ignore this entire podcast. Do not listen to a word that I said.
No, my thing, I wish I hadn't waited so long to do this. I think all the time, like, man, if I'd started this, if I'd just written down, my script ideas 10 years ago when I had them, or 15 years ago when I had them, where would I be now? What would my progress look like now when I was younger and had actually more income? So don't let the idea of, oh, I don't know how to do that, stop you from doing anything, particularly writing. I mean, writing is free. We all know how to write. We all have a computer or a laptop or a pencil and paper. And that's sort of the groundwork. If you want to be a filmmaker, that's you can't sit around and think, well, I'm a great cameraman, I need someone with a script to come around and ask me to film it. You just have to write it yourself. There's nothing prohibiting us anymore from making these short films. We all have the technology in our pocket, and again, writing is free, and who cares if it's a crappy script? Robert Rodriguez said in his book, Rebel Without a Crew, he said, you have to make 10 bad films before you make your first good one. So go out there and make 10 bad films, and know that that's the path you actually have to take to make a good one.
Well said. Jamison, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, same. All right, take care.